I recently got asked, Andrew, do you have to renounce your citizenship to benefit as a nomad capitalist? Is there a simpler path? A lot of people get confused, the idea of your citizenship, your residence, and your tax residence. And it's easy to do because Americans have their own set of rules, other countries have their own set of rules. Today I'm going to answer the question, do you have to renounce your citizenship to benefit from the stuff we talk about? Hi, I'm Andrew Henderson. I'm the founder of Nomad Capitalist, where we help 7- and 8-figure and sometimes 9- and 10-figure entrepreneurs and investors legally go where you're treated best. You can learn more at nomadcapitalist.com. So, do you have to renounce your citizenship? I think people ask this question because back in 2017, I made the decision to permanently sever my ties with the United States. I've been living out of the country for a number of years. I never had a great connection to the country. I didn't really want to go back to the country. Certainly didn't need a job in the country. And so I realized as life was becoming harder for expats and as I just needed the country less and less, that the passport wasn't serving me and I would rather just, be away. And I've experienced a lot more peace of mind, a lot more calm. In fact, I've had people who have met me back in the day that I was a US citizen, back in the days that I lived in the US many years ago, and now and say, you seem a lot more calm. Now, I've said before, what I did may not be what you need to do. And so, do you have to renounce your citizenship? Absolutely not. So what I've learned in talking with, working with, knowing a lot of people who have expatriated, namely from the United States, is that contrary to what the media will tell you, contrary to what some people in the government probably believe, it is generally not exclusively about I don't want to pay taxes. Some people will certainly have more financial motivations than others. Some of those financial motivations might be, I'm an American, I live in Europe, this is my home, I can't get a mortgage, my kid can't get a bank account, it's a pain in the butt. Sometimes some employers are even saying, we should probably renounce because it's getting pretty tough for us as the employer. They might be financial, but it's not about the tax payment because they're already paying taxes in some country, but it might just be the regulatory, the paperwork burden. A lot of people that I've talked to, they have other misgivings about their country. They're concerned about the direction it's going. They don't want to live there. They just don't believe in the country anymore. And they're saying, hey, if I can save some money on tax, that's a bonus. For me, I never really wanted to. Even from a very young age, I think at 16 years old, I wanted to live overseas. And so eventually it just became, why do I have this citizenship? Especially when it comes with so many regulations, so much paperwork to file. You really have to be careful what you're doing overseas as an American. So obviously other people besides Americans give up their citizenship, but one thing I do walk through with people is when I say, what are your concerns being a citizen of your country in terms of needing a second citizenship? They'll often list things that are about living in the country. We're concerned about violence. We're concerned about riots. We're concerned about the politics. Well, what if you could distance yourself from that by living somewhere else? Would the citizenship concern you? A lot of times they say no. After all, if you live in a Western country, how many immigrants do you know from countries that have problems? Are they really making a push to get rid of their Iraqi citizenship? Often not. They may have to give it up to become an American or Australian or whatever in some cases. But I think you've got to differentiate. What are your concerns being a citizen of your country? What are your concerns just being a resident of your country that could be resolved, moving somewhere else? And so the idea of expatriation just for taxes, I think, certainly some people do it. But I think a lot of us, had other misgivings that just felt distancing yourself would be better. But the summary is, as Barack Obama said, if you like your country, you can keep your country. You do not have to renounce your citizenship. And I'll tell you, most people who live the nomad capitalist lifestyle don't. Now, here's what you should understand. If you're an American, because we've been talking about Americans, there are going to be issues that you need to deal with as a citizen living overseas that follow you, even though you don't live in the U.S., you don't use the roads, you don't send your kids to the schools. Can you legally reduce your taxes as an American? If you run a business, if you have active income, yes, foreign earned income exclusion. Other programs, you can dramatically reduce your taxes or even eliminate them in some cases by living overseas. So you can definitely save money on taxes. You might not reduce it to zero the way someone else could. It really depends. There's a lot of things that go into that. But you can still dramatically reduce your taxes. If you are earning money through passive income, day traders, cryptocurrency investors, lots of those people coming to us these days, your option is basically moving to Puerto Rico or expatriating. There's not, for most retail investors, there are some other little options, but it just generally doesn't really pack much punch, right? So active business owners, people who are running a business, not a job, have the most options. People with a job have some options. and then people who are capital gains earners or who are earning passive income, what's considered passive income, probably the worst off, okay? So if you're looking to distance yourself from that and say, well, hold on a second. If you're like me, for years I spent 0 days in the US. And I filed my tax return. I did everything by the book. I filed my FBAR, reporting my bank accounts overseas. I did everything you had to do. Listen, you live in fear a little bit. What if I miss a decimal somewhere? What if I miss a number? Okay, you can fix things. They're probably not throwing you in the who's gal for 1 decimal. But, you want to do it properly and you want to make sure you don't miss anything. Most domestic accountants that I've seen, they don't know how to handle this stuff, so you have to have someone international. There's a lot that goes into it. And you start to think, the more you're out of the country, is it worth it? Now, what if you're not an American? There are people in politics, perhaps on the fringe, in Canada, in Germany, in Australia. I've heard from those the most, and we've seen that. We've talked about some of those politicians here on the channel who would like to implement some kind of similar policy. You also see in Europe, for example, they're very eager for global minimum tax on big companies. I've surmised that there may come a time when they're eager for a global minimum tax on their own citizens. I'm not saying it's for sure going to happen, but there may come a time when, hey, if you're German, and I've had several Germans, more than ever, coming to me saying, I think you might be right from what I'm hearing and what the elections are coming up. What if our politicians say you have to pay at least 15% a year for the privilege of being German? And so you can't move to Dubai and pay 0. Now, is that happening today? No. Is that going to happen? I don't know. The chance may not be 50% or 75. Maybe it's 10. Maybe it's 5. Maybe it's 1% in some countries. But, if I have 10 million or 50 million or $100 million, or I expect my assets to go to that level, do I want to at least be prepared where if my country comes, as you've seen so many countries in the last year say, we're looking at a wealth tax. What if a country said, you know what? Everyone's going to pay the wealth tax. If you're French, if you're German, if you're New Zealander, if you're whatever, we're going to make this extraterritorial. Can they do that? I don't know. But what if they start doing things like that, where the idea is we need to raise revenue, and hey, no more freeloaders living overseas. You carry our passport, you're one of us, you got to pay up too. If I had that large amount of money, or if I had a high income, I might want to be prepared with a second passport. People can say, oh, well, what's nationality worth? Listen, you can decide, right? If you are an American, you can decide. Let's say you make $5 million a year. You can live overseas. You're going to pay some tax in all likelihood. Depending on your situation, it could be 0. It might also be $500,000 or $600,000, $700,000. Is it worth $500,000 a year if you make $5 million to be an American? Listen, for me these days, I might not mind visiting. I'm not really in a rush to visit necessarily, but if you told me, Andrew, you can go back and live in the United States and pay only $500,000 in taxes a year, yeah, I could afford to pay that. I don't think I would live there if you paid me $500,000 a year. It just wouldn't really be worth it to me. It's not even the taxes. I just don't want to live there, right? Maybe I would go there for a week, but that's what I want. And so, if I'm in that situation and I don't want to be, I have friends who, for example, they're from Western countries. They don't want to go back. And so they're okay right now to be a citizen of New Zealand, to be a citizen of Norway, to be a citizen of wherever, and to say, okay, I'll keep my passport. But what if one day that country that they don't really like, they don't want to go back and live in, they don't even want to go back and visit really, decides, you know what, you got to pay us. Whether it's a one-time tax, whether it's an annual tax, whatever. That has happened, by the way. Countries have imposed retroactive taxes. They have imposed taxes even on people living overseas. If that came down to it, would you want to keep your nationality? That's the question. I had a guy a number of years ago. He had 4 amazing top tier, what we call tier A passports. One of them was the U.S. And I said, you can visit the U.S. with all of these other passports, right? One of them, Canada, you can basically come on in for 6 months. Now, we need to do some tax planning with that level of visiting, but you've got a lot of access to the U.S., right? And in his case, he had actually been living and paying taxes in one of these countries for a long time. So it's not exactly like he was trying to not pay taxes. And I said, do you need the U.S. passport? He said, yeah, it's worth it. It's worth the paperwork. It's worth some of the regulations. I won't bribe the officials overseas. That's a regulation. It's worth it. And it's worth the compliance costs and all the headaches just in case I want to go back in the future. I think he was 40 and he's saying maybe when I'm 60, I'll go and live in California on the coast. My comment to him was there may come a time when you want to get rid of that pretty quickly. And, for me, the carrying cost for the possibility, 20 years of carrying cost for the possibility that I might move back, it's not worth it. But again, I never had the desire to go back. If that's worth it to you, then by all means keep it. But I think that you have to consider, your desire to expatriate. What are your other passports? If you have amazing passports and you can come back and visit your country, then that's a different story than if you're going out and getting your second passport, which is the Caribbean citizenship. And if you're a Westerner, from US or Canada or Australia or New Zealand, you're going to need a visa to go back, right? Until you get something better. And so how does that make you feel? So these are the factors. But what is it worth to you to expatriate? No, you don't have to do it, and the vast majority of people don't. Again, Americans are painted more into a corner, but it's a very personal decision. And I bet a lot of people would say, $5 million, it's worth $500,000. I may not think it's fair, but it's worth it. A lot of people would say that. I might not, you might not, but a lot of people would say it. And I think that you kind of have to get over that fairness hurdle and ask what's best for me in my life, ask what the current value is, ask what the future value is. That's a question that only you can answer. How can Nomad Capitalist help you? 4 ways. Number 1, subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell to make sure you get our new video every day. Number 2, get a copy of Nomad Capitalist, the book. You'll learn a lot of my personal experiences over a dozen years of studying this stuff, as well as exactly some of the strategies that you can use to build your Nomad Capitalist plan. Number 3, if you're not sure where to start, but you want to come and learn from my team and I, you want to come and mingle with like-minded people, learn more about our live conference, Nomad Capitalist Live. It's coming up soon. And number 4, if you want some help right now because you've got a burning issue, you need something solved, you want to lower your taxes, get a second passport, or build the Nomad Capitalist lifestyle of your dreams, go to nomadcapitalist.com and click on Become a Client.